Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of The Log Show here on WSJU and on YouTube. I am your host, Logan here, and we do have a very, very special episode today. As you see, there is an extra person here in the booth with me, someone who I have had a lot of fun with this year, one of my professors, not only a professor, former player at Wagner, also coached for 15 years at Wagner, coached in many places in the minor leagues, founder of the Staten Island Tide. Not only that, coach in the Cape Cod League with the Brewster Whitecaps, won himself a championship up there. One of the best professors I have so far at St. John's. Good friend of mine, I almost could call him, Mr. Tommy Weber. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, man. Great introduction. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And, of course, also in the corner over there, you could kind of see him on camera, is Eric. He's always back. He's always having fun. He's always here.
We like to have fun. We like to keep it light. We like to keep it fresh.
So, as we know, we have a lot going on in sports around today. And, Mr. Weber, I mean, we talk about it a lot in class. We talk about baseball a lot with your baseball upbringing. But not only, there's a sport we don't talk about a lot that I did find out in my research that you did play growing up, which is hockey. Mm-hmm. So I did want to ask you, like, growing up playing hockey a little bit, not like, obviously, you've talked about baseball, we talked about your coaching career.
Yep.
Playing hockey, what did hockey teach you that baseball really didn't, just to, like, start?
Well, first of all, it's Dr. Weber. Okay, so just kidding. Hockey was really at its infancy in the New York area when I played. So ice time was very, very rare. It was very hard to get on the ice. So we did a lot of like 3:45 in the morning practices and 2 o'clock in the morning practices, traveled great lengths just to play. There weren't a lot of people playing at the time, and the only place that you could play basically was Flushing Meadows, which was one of the rinks, which had concrete boards at the time. And I remember my grandmother, when my father would wake us up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to go play, would tell my father that it was child abuse to take children out at 3 o'clock in the morning to go and play hockey. But making those kinds of sacrifices, and hockey's not an easy game to play. It's a very, very difficult, time-consuming game to play. You have to really be committed to playing. And I loved every second of it. I mean, we had a great team in high school, and I remember, I'm good friends with a lot of those guys that I played with, and I think it taught me a lot about winning, how important and how much fun winning was, and I think that's when I became addicted to winning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love hockey. I do have a you always say you don't have favorite teams. Is there like a hockey team you go towards? Like, do you Rangers or anything?
I think I've seen probably 4 or 5 great dynasties in my lifetime in sports, and the New York Islander dynasty in the 80s is one of the greatest. Maybe I could make an argument, and my friends and I would debate this. I don't know that Islander team wasn't the greatest team that I've ever seen.
The good old Strive for 5 teams.
Yes.
My dad still talks about those all the time. My dad still chants Strive for 5 anytime he sees the Islanders. Still to this day. It's so much fun. And
if they didn't have all those injuries, they wouldn't have won the 5th in a row, but they lost to Edmonton. But
yeah, sadly.
What else I love about hockey?
What?
In an age in where real pure competition seems to be at a lull, I love the fact that it seems to me, well, it doesn't seem to me, I love the fact that in the NHL, the teams don't like each other. They have a genuine dislike for one another, and I think that's a really healthy thing when you're competing. They are not friends. Nobody's hugging anybody in between face-offs, and when they're going at it, they give each other everything they possibly can, and once the game's over, they leave and it's over. But hockey seems to be the last sport in which there's not a whole lot of camaraderie between the combatants, and I really like that.
I feel like I love hockey so much too because it's held so much tradition. Like I feel like college football was like, I feel like one of the last ones too, but they're starting to lose their way a lot. But like hockey's still very much built on tradition, and I love that, where it's still like they do things the same way that they always have, and like it's still not changing. And I feel like part of that, I don't know, is because of like it's not as Americanized. I feel like you've talked about this in class before, and you've talked about it recently about how like in the U.S. it's not easily accessible to play hockey. You have to pay a lot of money and stuff like that.
It's an access game in the U.S.
Where in Europe, Canada, they just have ice and Sweden and
those games are more accessible to people who don't have great resources.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree, and I'm really encouraged to hear you say that because I'm hopeful that your generation respects and values the fact that a sport is still true to some of the traditions that make it the sport that it is, and not interested in changing everything about it just because they can, which is what the other sports have done. Hockey is very steeped in tradition. They have a great deal of respect for the Stanley Cup and for the players that came before them. I think hockey, more than any other game, really values the people upon whose shoulders the current players stand, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, just the product they put on the ice, especially in playoff time, I think personally it's the best playoff sport.
I agree.
I think it is easily the best playoff. The way that playoff hockey is just up and down and constant scoring chances back and forth, and it's so much fun.
There's no loafing in hockey.
No.
You can't take a player off because you get your head taken off. So, yeah, you really know you're getting, to me it's a lot like boxing. You know each combatant is giving their all because they can't afford not to give their all.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that the Stanley Cup is the hardest championship to win in American sports. What do you think about that?
Well, I think no other championship holds the allure. There may be some individual championships in individual sports, like in golf, winning the Masters. Guys play their whole life and they don't think their career is complete if they don't win certain events, winning at Wimbledon or winning the U.S. Open in tennis. But team sports, I don't think there's any other championship that's as valued as the Stanley Cup is to the rank and file player in the NHL. No doubt about it.
I mean, no, yeah. I mean, would you throw the Lombardi up there though? And the only reason I throw that in the conversation is because of the nature of every other sport has the series, while the NFL is just that one game. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, I feel like a series is always set up for the best team to win in a series, whereas you have that one game in the NFL, the best.
Everything's sudden death.
Exactly. Everything comes down to that day.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say one is easier. What I think, though, is that the rank-and-file player is so enamored with the Stanley Cup and the lore of the Stanley Cup and the history of the Stanley Cup that they're more vested in just getting that cup. Obviously, they wouldn't, but they'd almost play for free to get that Stanley Cup.
They value it more
they
than
really
any
do.
other
And that's
sport.
because of the situation that you brought up earlier, is that they play basically the equivalent of playing in the street ice hockey in Canada and Europe.
No, yeah. I mean, speaking of championships like the Stanley Cup, you've won a couple in your time coaching. The one I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the beginning of this process. Back in 2010, you not only were managing, but you founded the Staten Island Tide.
Yep.
So, just for starters, what was that process like in finding and being the founder of a minor league team, getting that together?
Well, it's a wood bat league sponsored by Major League Baseball. It's not a minor league team. It's a college league team. It's a regional college league. At that time, the college leagues were starting to wane a little bit. Fewer players were playing in the summer, and if they were playing less. So I had finished up at St. Francis College with Frank Del George, who I think is at least the best coach I've ever been around, one of the finest coaches in the country. And Frank and I started to talk about what we would like to do next. And I decided that I was going to have a team, and I was going to enter it into the ACBL. So I had my buddy Neil Barbella and we painstakingly went through the process of incorporating the team and designing a logo and picking the colors. I mean, we went through a lot to sort of make this thing representative of what we felt a team should be, and we were going to do it right. And one of our main edicts was, if we're going to do it, it has to be done right. And I think we came up with a fantastic scheme and a plan, and we executed that plan almost to perfection. I really do. I think that those first few years were just really, really how you should run a ball club from the top down, from the administration, raising money, uniforms, field selection, and obviously down to the field where it was player selection and execution on the field.
No, yeah, you also bring up how enjoyable those first years were. You ended up winning a championship there in 2011. One thing I definitely wondered is, obviously winning a championship no matter what feels good. In any sport, in any level, winning a championship feels good. Being it with a team that you didn't just take over, like, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't just get hired as a coach. You founded this team.
Yeah, we birthed that team.
Did it feel better?
Absolutely. Oh, no doubt about it. It was great. It was very vindicating. It's validating when you win. You get to call yourself the best. That's the one of the fringe benefits of winning is you are the best there is that year. And I remember when I was talking to Neil earlier on in the year, I said, our design is going to be, we're going to shrink the field, and our best pitcher is going to be our defense. And we started to talk about it, and I stand here telling you as a declaration that is the finest defensive outfield that has ever set foot on a major league team. We had the only two-time Gold Glove winner in the history of the NCAA. We had a major league center fielder and two other players who wound up playing professional baseball that were jackrabbits. Everybody could fly. It was like having a track team in the outfield. And the theory was this: to the extent we gave the team less places to hit the ball, our pitchers didn't have to be as good. Because pitching is at a premium, especially in the summertime. Guys are pitching fewer innings. They're being held back. So what I said is, fine. I know that's the hand I'm going to be dealt. Well, how can we compensate for that? Well, the way we could do that is by shrinking the field, and we did. If that ball was hit in the air, it was caught, and it was an amazing thing to watch, and it is the finest amateur outfield that has ever been assembled. No doubt about it.
Man, I liked it. I like to hear that. I like the confidence.
No?
I mean, I believe it. You know what? I wish I could have seen it, honestly, the way you talk about it.
Look, somebody might come up with a better one, but if you do, it ain't a whole lot better, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah, and just like, not only that, I mean, you've not only won a championship there, you then ended up being a bench coach for the Brewster Whitecaps in the Cape Cod League.
Yep.
You ended up getting a championship there in 2017.
Yep.
What was the differences in those two leagues? Winning a championship, going through the process of those two leagues?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the Cape Cod League is the best league in the world. There's no better league than the Cape Cod League. Those players at that level are the best players on the planet, essentially. At that level, they are the best college players in America, and it is so rich in talent that it's mind-boggling. And for a guy like me, I liken it to, you're invited to jam with the Beatles. I mean, that's really what you're doing. And every day was a great adventure for me. I was able to essentially handle all the development work, early work and stuff like that. So I got these incredible players who were all in early on. And we spent long hours together and had great dialogues. And I learned so much in that experience that, summiting, winning in a unbreakable fashion. I'm a part of a record that could never be broken. We played the most games you could possibly play in the playoffs. 9 games, 9 days, faced elimination 5 times. And we summited every single time and wound up winning the championship. And not every team that I've ever been around is great. Not every player is a great kid. People say that, and that's just not the case. This was a special experience, and there were a lot of reasons behind the scenes and off the field that made it what it was. And obviously, I had my dear friends with me. I brought my guys out to the Cape with me to coach as well, and they were fantastic. And Neil was with me again, and we won another championship. So it really was. Just an experience that I'm some of my closest friends to this day are my players who I've worked with for the last 7 or 8 years. I've seen some of them go to the major leagues. So I really feel like it's, for me who's been in player development my whole life, that's really, when I look back on my life, what I've done is try to get guys from point A to point B and find a way to do that. And it's been a great privilege to have so many of those guys be a part of my life for so long in such a profound way that it's something that it was a blessing. It really was.
That whole 9 games in 9 days, facing elimination 5 times. How do you handle that as a coach in that locker room? I feel like there's a lot of a lot of mental fatigue happens there amongst players.
I can tell you how.
A lot to handle.
So the Cape's an interesting place. All the player stuff is fantastic. A lot of the other stuff is not, but I don't want to go into that. Everybody wants to go home. That's just reality. And every night we faced elimination, we knew something good was going to happen. We were either going to win or we were going to go home. So we kind of couldn't lose. And you're shot by the time the playoffs come. It's a long, for a 7 o'clock game, we started having guys come to early work at 11:30. You know, guys are so involved, immersed, and committed in becoming better players that we would be at the field at like 11 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. You know, so it was long days and places closed down. We couldn't get stuff to eat, but we knew, I think we all knew that there was just a purpose for why we were doing this, and we were vested in the players just as they were in us. So I think the way we handled it was, I tend, as you know, I keep it loose. You know, I'm just, that's my, you know, I don't take a lot seriously. I take what we do seriously, very seriously, but I don't take me seriously. And I think what we did really well was during that time sort of downplay it. You know, we got to the field and you could tell the tensions were really high. When we got down, when we were down in the playoffs, you know, then the tensions were really high and people were conflicted because the reality is guys wanted to go home. And if we're going to lose, let's lose now. But to their credit, and they deserve all the credit in the world, nobody, once that first pitch was thrown, was going to let go of this thing, and they didn't, and they wound up winning a championship.
And also on that, like another question I have when it comes to like locker room and handling that type of stuff is like one big thing that I've heard Nick Saban say recently, now that he's been in the media a lot, is winning is a poison. He said that a lot in a way. How do you handle that? Not only where, like, obviously losing is bad for a team. I think everybody knows that. As much as the media will say it over and over again, I think everybody knows obviously losing is bad for a team. How do you handle when a team is winning, like, you know what I mean? You look like as the season's going on, you might be putting together a championship team, a team you're confident can make a run. How do you keep those egos in check as well, where they're not too confident?
I'll give you a quick story. Something happened pretty much right at the point where we started to take off. So we were taking BP one day, and it became home run derby. And I was really getting sickened by this because guys throwing 40 miles an hour at you, you're some of the best players in the world, you should be able to hit the ball out of the ballpark in BP. And I felt like, for some reason, it coagulated. Like there was this thing that came to me, or coalesced, I should say. And it came to me, and I said, you know, we're doing something wrong here. This is not good. This doesn't bode well for the rest of the season. So I said, stop. I said, here's the deal. You can hit the ball as hard as you want, but you can't hit it out of the park. And if you hit it out of the park, you got to go chase it. Because I wanted more quality strikes than, you know, home runs, because anybody could hit a home run in. And guys were like, wow. I said, don't do it. Do not hit it out of the park. I want you to hit it through the fence, but you can't hit it over the fence, because they had become so home run conscious. That night we scored like 14 runs, and we never looked back after that point. So I not that there's some design or there's some plan you could have, but I think you have to be good with seizing the moment. And I think you have to feel enough faith in your ability and in your gut and in your instinct and your experience to come up with something that plots a different course. You know, when you see the train going off track a little bit, you got to be able to nudge it. I don't think, you know, too many coaches are about control. It's not about control. It's just about, you know, a little shove to the right when you see your guys going to the left. And if you could do that in an inventive way and in a way that engages them, because they kind of had fun with it all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden it broke this mold where it wasn't just about hitting the ball high and far, which anybody could do. It was about hitting the ball artfully. And I can't say that that's not the reason we won. We won because of them and their play. But that night there was a shift. And, you know, now we were going in a little bit of a different direction, and we just took off. And, you know, and we all got rings.
Now, we talk about this a lot in class. I kind of want to start getting into this. There's another championship that happened recently that you have a lot of opinions on, which is the Yankees.
I'm not an opinionated person.
Not at all.
I couldn't tell.
But, I mean, we talk about baseball, and obviously you've been in baseball for so long, been around the sport for so long.
Right.
It has changed a lot recently, over the past couple of years.
Yes, it has.
Not only obvious, I mean, the obvious, there's the obvious ones with the pitch count, the runner on second, and
pitch clock, yes.
The pitch clock, yeah,
yes.
Runner on second.
Yes.
But what else have you seen changes-wise? I mean, I know we've talked about it in class, but just so like my viewers kind of know, what else behind the scenes has changed majorly in baseball?
Well, in such a short period of time, this tsunami of information and data and the value of data and analytics has dramatically shifted the whole zeitgeist, if you will, of development in baseball. It has become, if you can't to a great degree. If you can't measure something, it has no value, and if you can measure it, it has tremendous value. And I think that has really led to I think this, I would like to think that this World Series, the exhibition put on in this World Series, is a clarion call to a lot of people who say, you know what, we might need to change how we do things.
What would you have done differently? Like, I know obviously you talked about in class you wouldn't have even had Judge, but let's say you get thrown in game 1 with this team.
Well, I mean, you can't do that because game 1 is the result of game 1 to 170, or however many they played, including the playoffs. So your starting point is not game 1. Your starting point is your development, who you pick in the draft, how you develop players in the minor leagues. I mean, we could spend the next 3 days with me telling you how I would do that. I'd have a much more player-centric approach. I would have I'd have a more nuanced approach to how I developed players. I'd be more curious about players who perhaps didn't quite light up the numbers. I'd want versatility. I'd want guys who could, the Yankees, I mean, we're talking about the Yankees now. The Yankees have zero versatility. They don't, you look at the Dodgers have a lot of guys who could play a lot of different positions. That's really invaluable. I know it's hard to measure it. See, it's not sexy, and if you can't measure it, it doesn't have any value, but it has all the value in the world. That's where the value is. And obviously, I think, if you want to just go back to your question, taking Cole out in game 1, I think, was a colossal mistake. Colossal mistake. You pay a guy $35 million a year. He's only going to pitch twice. You got to ride him. I'm sorry. You can be hot. Garrett Cole, 80% of Garrett Cole is better than anybody you're bringing out of your okay bullpen. And bullpens are grossly overrated. The Yankee bullpen was grossly overrated. They're up, they're down. That's why you see relievers. One year they're like the best reliever in baseball, and 2 years later they're playing in the Atlantic League. It's the nature of relief pitchers. They're very fickle. But when you've got a $35 million guy, and Garrett Cole, no matter what you think about him, is one of the top 2 or 3, 5 guys in the game, I'm riding him before I go and get him because he gave up his second hit in the 7th inning.
How would you approach the offseason as the Yankees?
I think the Yankees have a real... Again...
You're losing a lot here as the Yankees. You have no Verdugo. I guess Cole's back. We talked about that before. Cole is back, but you have no Verdugo.
Glaber's gone.
We've talked about this in class. You have no infield outside of shortstop.
You only need, really, a first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, left fielder, and probably a right fielder.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're fine.
And maybe a catcher.
Yeah, and your catching position there. Yeah, your catching position is, do you want to go with a young guy who has shown some promise? If you want to do that, left-handed hitter who's got some pop, I don't have any issue with that. I'd give that kid a chance to prove himself. I don't think you have to go and spend tons of money because I think the catcher position is kind of barren in the major leagues right now. But, first base, second base, third base.
They were looking at Alonso.
Well, that's certainly, in right center field, Yankee Stadium, guy Pete Alonso. But again, I'm not a big advocate of buying baseball players middle age. I'm really one for buying your youth. I don't mind buying you from 20 to 30. But past 30, overpaying for a guy who basically you're paying more for what they did than what they're going to do, I would get out of that habit if I were the Yankees.
Yeah. No, I mean, going back to it, we've talked about this in class. They've made a lot of mistakes with those contracts going into those.
You think?
those especially those older guys. I feel like since the younger Steinbrenner has taken over, it's been like a pattern of Starlin Castro. There was Jacoby Ellsbury,
Clint Frazier, Gary Sanchez. I could name a slew of
Josh
people
Donaldson
that have come through the Yankees who they have told you aren't what you see they are. The Yankees are seeing something that you can't see, and that's the kind of arrogance that gets the Titanic sunk.
Now, is that all from analytics, though? Or?
Part of it is. It's not all from analytics, but part of it is this incredible adherence to measurables. There was the famous incident with Matt Carpenter in the playoffs a couple of years back where he hadn't played in 2 months. And he's Matt Carpenter, and he's old, and he's hobbled. But somebody said that they measured his bat speed, and that's what determined them deciding to put him on the playoff roster, and he was basically an out throughout the entire playoffs. So they do heavily rely on things that they can measure rather than just saying, hey, listen, we got way more out of Matt Carpenter than we could have ever expected. Let's leave the table now with the money we have rather than taking it all and continuing to play and giving it all back to the casino. That's a pretty good analogy, I think, right?
I like that
You
one.
like that one?
I like that one. I like your analogy.
I need more affirmation.
No, absolutely. But, like, you look at somebody like some of these guys that the Yankees have signed who really just haven't panned out, and behind the scenes they're saying, hey, this guy's really good, he just hasn't panned out. Like, at what point do you really just decide, like, this guy's, like, just cut him, like, this guy's not going to be worth it? Like, what have you ever experienced something like that?
You mean like let's see, Aaron Hicks?
Sure.
Aaron Hicks, who they gave a $70 million contract to while he was injured.
Yeah.
I don't know what they saw. I never understood that. I mean, I understood it. They went because he had a high OPS. The problem with OPS is that it values hits and walks the same way. And if your high water mark is that you walk a lot, I don't want you. Because a walk is not a hit, and a walk is not nearly as valuable as a hit. You need lots of hits. Hits drive and runs. Hits get bases. Hits move guys around the bases. A walk only advances you one base. If the bases aren't loaded, you can't drive anybody in. So overvaluing OPS caused the Yankees to really, cause a blockade in their organization for a long time, because you're paying the guy $10 million a year for 7 years. You're going to play him, but he was almost, again, the Yankees have had a lot of instances of having to play players who are almost a zero in your lineup. And I'm sure the average Yankee fan could list 10 of them where you're almost playing with 8 guys because you've married that guy. So now you got to go with him.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you say. It's essentially like the anti-Moneyball, although in the movie they don't explain that the A's had essentially the best.
Right, Moneyball is a little bit of a mythology. If it works so well, why have the A's been like the worst team playoff-wise in the last 22 years? And I understand. Information's great. Information is great. Like any other medication, it's about dosage.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to make strong gut moves in the battlefield, right? When the I talk about when the puck is dropped and the chaos ensues. The measurables don't really help you much. You've got to have a guy who has a feel for the battle. You want your generals to have a feel so that they can make in-game decisions where they have to pivot. Baseball is a game that changes every pitch. What's right in the first inning with second and third and 2 out might not be right in the fourth inning and might be right in the seventh inning again. So the game is almost a lot of games in a game. Mm-hmm. It's what makes the game great. It's not an action game, but it's a tension-filled, suspense-filled game. And you got to kind of be able to track that in a way that's organic, because you can't track it. It's like when you sit at the table, if tracking the numbers worked all the time, the casinos would be out of business, because you can't predict the future. I mean, you could feel comfortable about your choices, but you can't predict the future. And some of those things have been catastrophic. And I point to Garrett Cole, and I point to Kevin Cash.
Yeah, 2020.
How that didn't trigger a reset for a lot of organizations is beyond me. Yeah. Beyond me. That is really the textbook case of oof. Because at that night, it's not Blake Snell on the mound. It wasn't Blake Snell on the mound. What it was Warren Spahn, Sandy Koufax, Randy Johnson, Steve Carlton in the body of Blake Snell that night.
Yeah.
And you should have ridden him, and you would have won that game. The Dodgers know they would have played a Game 7. Mookie Betts said it. When they took him out, what happened? It was a sigh of relief. Because I know, I've been in those situations where a guy is just mowing you down. You have no chance. I don't care who you are. You're thinking, if they don't get rid of this, if we don't get this guy out, somehow we're not winning this game.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about Aaron Boone, too, with his philosophy, like you said, how he's big on analytics. And also, he's also been known as this big, like, players coach and, like, this and, like, the players guy. And we talk about this in class. It's big in football now, too, with Mike McDaniel and all these guys. I mean, you call yourself a laid-back guy as a coach, but, like,
yeah, I'm a players guy.
How do you manage that balance, though, of not being, not getting walked on as a coach, like not letting the players start to take advantage of you, where like, like we start to see this in some franchises where like the Yankees are almost becoming like this, where, Jazz can wear a green belt and do whatever he wants. Stanton can complain about playing right field and all of a sudden he's a DH for the rest of his career. And even though, he does run at -4 miles per hour, but it's still like the fact that he could just complain and be like, I don't want to do it, and it was like, okay, like, where do you draw that line?
Well put. Well put. A great question, and I think you saw the worst outcome of that manifest itself in the World Series. The Yankees have for a long time been a team that doesn't play really good baseball. They don't. Look, if you spend enough money in baseball, you're going to win 88 to 91 games. And the playoff system is expanded enough so that you'll get in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You will get in. It's almost impossible. I don't know, maybe I should give the class a project. How many teams that spent over a certain amount of money don't make the playoffs? And if they don't make the playoffs, how many years do they make the playoffs? Even the Yankees, they didn't make the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
That's not the barometer for success anymore, because you could just spend your way into a playoff spot. So I think what you saw over that week, which was the worst exhibition of baseball that I think I've ever seen, certainly that I've ever seen in a World Series, it was just awful, is the potential repercussions of that kind of mentality. Not unlike the Steve Nash Brooklyn Nets, where you're going to love your players to death. And see, as a parent, you love your children, but you watch them when they're around the pool. You don't let them go in the pool alone. You don't let them cross the street alone. Right? They do have some supervision. That doesn't mean you're hovering over them 24 hours a day. Well, that's the way it does mean nowadays. But that doesn't mean you have to do that. But nonetheless, when they're in a circumstance where there is a peril, you just don't leave them unchecked. And I think the same goes for coaches in sports. You don't have to be a tyrant, but there has to be a chain of command. And the players need to know that somebody is enlisted with making the final decision, and then that's it. It's not up for discussion all day long, because you have a game to play and a schedule to play and another game after that and after that. So I love my players. I'm a pushover as a person. But I make out the lineup card, right?
Yeah.
In my classes, I love students. I love teaching. I think I bring a lot to the table. I give the grade. Grade is the ultimate discipline, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead. Don't come to my class. That's okay. You'll never hear me encourage someone. You got to come. I'm not going to counsel you. If I have to motivate you to come to class, it's like me motivating you to pay attention on the field. And the other thing that I think that's very important when you watch the Yankees, and not only the Yankees are not the only culprits, it's an epidemic in baseball. Because they're distracted, I think the modern player is distracted. And I think part of that is because there is no supervision. There's very little supervision. And the expectations are very low for how you behave. Such that, as is the case with young people, your priorities become askew. The Yankees seem more focused on how to celebrate, how to dress, how to not be in uniform, than they are when a ground ball's hit the shortstop and you're at second base, that you don't run to the third base and they throw you out. Like, those are the important things, and you can only be focused on so much. And if you're focused on that extraneous stuff, it's got to somehow take away from the focus on the field. And I have there's one litmus test for me with respect to your behavior. If you can somehow articulate to me that it helps us win, go ahead and do it. But if you can't, then you can't do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this year's Mets, who really had a lot of fun. They had a lot of different gimmicks going on.
Yes.
And I'm kind of just interested on your perspective, because Carlos Mendoza was a first-year manager. And so I guess as from a coach's mind, how are you able to balance being a first-time manager? How are you able to balance all these gimmicks and then continue winning and be 2 wins away from a World Series appearance?
I think Carlos Mendoza deserves a tremendous amount of credit. I was very impressed. I watch games with the sound off, so I get a real feel for, and I thought, I was very impressed by his body language. I'm big into body language. You can really tell a lot by watching a guy. I'm a stickler for that kind of thing. I liked his countenance at times. He seemed stern at times, under control I never saw him, when he had issues with umpires, he never sort of came out in a childish way. He always had a real adult way of conducting himself. And I think that's a message that you send to your team without having to send it, is that, hey, I'm in charge, I'm the leader here. You don't have to say it. If you have to say you're the leader, you're not the leader. The stuff that the Mets did, and oh my God and all that stuff, look, I could take or leave that, but I'll tell you what, I never saw it once. I didn't think the Mets were a distracted team. I thought it was just the opposite. You can do whatever you want. You could fly in on a hot air balloon for all I care. If you get it done on the field, I have no right to say anything to you. The Yankees don't get it done on the field, and they haven't gotten it done on the field for a long time. This is the style of play. I talk about the brand of baseball you play. It's like a golfer. You may not shoot the best score today, but your brand of golf is really strong. Well, it's the same thing in baseball. Your brand of baseball is terrible. The Yankee brand of baseball is not good. It's not. The Met brand of baseball this year was very good.
I like that.
No, I mean, one question I've had for you, at least for a while, just to like kind of get into that, is like
You've been harboring a question?
No, I've thought of this for a while, for a little, ever since you said this in class. You talk about all the time coaching, how like you said it, you even said it before. You're a big players guy. You've always said you're against this.
I don't know how you could be a big. I don't be anything but a big players guy.
Well, I mean,
it's like being a professor and not being a student. Of course, I'm a student advocate. What else am I going to be? The desk advocate, the blackboard advocate? I mean, that's you are the product. You are the focus. I'm not the focus. My guys are the focus. My players are the focus. And I'm not saying that so that somebody says, "Oh, wow, you're such a great guy." I'm saying that for selfish reasons. I can't get out of you what I need unless I make you the focus. But go ahead. Well, I'm sorry. What was your question?
You said you're against discipline.
I never said I was against discipline.
That's what. Has a player ever pushed you
Yes.
to that point of like running sprints or like traditional?
Killing him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
What did he do?
One time.
I need to know what pushed you to that point.
So I'm not against discipline, but I think you discipline animals. You manage people. And I think it's really important that the people you manage know you're in it with them. If you can't convey that, you're swimming upstream in a genuine way. And I think that goes for any mentorship or parenting or whatever. People have to know. Players desperately want to know they're not in it alone. They want to feel connected. They want to feel connected not only to their fellow players, but to the people who make out the lineup card, who are the presumed authority figures, right, in the pecking order.
So, like, sorry to cut you off, but for example, like in football, like when people see like Dan Campbell and he's out there, he's doing the burpees with the team, like that kind of stuff, or like.
Yeah, I think that's folly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for show.
I don't know. I can't get inside of his motivations, but to me, yeah, Dan Campbell's doing a good job. His team is very good. If you win, nobody cares.
Winning hides all.
Yeah, winning. That's the problem. Winning hides all the blemishes. But everybody has a different style. I think that you just need to align yourself with your players in a way that conveys to them two messages that might not always be concomitant. They may almost seem like they're mutually exclusive. I'm with you, but I'm in charge. That's the balance. That's the delicate balance of leadership. The delicate balance of leadership is that I'll take a bullet for you, but don't put me to the test. And that's what happened with that one player. He put me to the test. So, I'll tell the story if you want.
Oh, please.
So I was one of the really great things that I did for a person who likes to be in charge and tell people what to do is I was an assistant for a very long time. It was the best thing I ever did. Because when you're second in command, you have to follow orders, right? And you have to follow them, as I say, assiduously, without any question, and that's it. It's not your baby. So I remember a dear friend of mine who we lost recently, Richie Vitaliano, who coached at Wagner College and coached me when I played, and was just really such a wonderful person in my life. When I was in rough shape, he picked me up and told me everything was going to be all right, and I owe him so much for that, and I'll miss him every day of my life. And so my job as an assistant coach is to take a lot of the pressure off the head coach, right, or the manager. And we had gotten our brains beat in, and we had a long trip back to Wagner College on a bus, and we're hungry and we're tired. And guys were fooling around in the back, and they were just fooling around. I could tell Richie was steamed. And I asked him to stop, right? And this one guy who was, a guy there was no love lost between the two of us to begin with, kept chirping, and he kept chirping. And I lost it, and I went back there, and we had to be separated because I had had enough. I mean, I was at the end, and you don't do that to the head guy, and that was the only time when I really had a confrontation with a player.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I've never had to discipline a player, never.
Also asking about players. I meant to get into this earlier, and I kind of got sidetracked. You've coached a lot of players, some notable ones. Mickey Gasper, who you had come in and talk to the class. Former first-round pick Hunter Bishop.
Mike Massey.
How have your relationships with these guys continued, and how have they made an impact on you as a coach, going forward?
Wow, you're good. I talk about this a lot. They've all, obviously, Mickey and I are dear friends. All these guys I'm friends with. I value their friendship. You become friends. You get really close. You get invested in these people, especially when you win, and especially when the stakes are high. And for those guys, the stakes were always high. This is not, we're not fooling around here. These guys have, potentially major league careers and lots of implications that go with that, and they've put a lot of time, and all tireless workers, and, just want to get better. And I spoke to Mike not long ago. I spoke to. That's now what we call texting. I spoke to his dad. Mike's dad is a cool guy. I'm stay in touch with him. Look, it's like anything else that you cultivate. It's like my rose garden. If you don't take care of the roses, you don't monitor them, you don't keep up with them, they're going to die. And it's like that's what friendships are. And we have chosen to keep up those friendships and stay in touch with each other. And I hope that we're going to do that for a long time to come. So what did I learn? I try to learn something from every guy. I learn about, that's why I always ask guys where they're from. I want to know as much about you as I possibly can, because that kind of paints a picture of who you are and what I could expect, and what can I kind of what can I exploit, right? Hey, you're from Brooklyn, I'm from Brooklyn, that kind of thing. Or you're from California, I'm not from California, and I can make fun of you for that fact. And then all of a sudden we start to get close. You trust me, I trust you. Now we have this relationship, and we can go on from there. So all these guys, Brandon Martorano and Kyle Datcher, all of them. I'd fail to name too many of them if I started to name any of them. So, but all of them have been really, really prominent figures in my life.
I have a question regarding your player development, and when these guys are maybe going through a tough time, or they're in the big leagues and they're not playing, or they're really having a tough time, what do you say to them? What advice do you give them to?
I give you my Zach Granite story. Zach Granite, major league player with the Yankees, Twins, right? Zach Granite was the focus of our Staten Island Tide team. When I thought I was going to do the Staten Island Tide, Zach was like a junior in high school, and I knew him, and I said, in 2011, he's the player we have to get, because he's a difference maker. He's a great outfielder, runs like the wind. He was perfect for what we were trying to do, and we did get him, and he helped lead us to a championship, and we became really good friends. And Zach was in Double-A, and it's funny, most of the calls you get are when your players aren't doing well, and that's okay, right? It's like your children. They call you when they need money, not when they have money. So Zach calls me. I know exactly where I was. I was in my office, and I'm on my cell phone, and I walk around when I'm talking. I'm pacing, and he's struggling, and he's in Double-A, and I said to him, Zach, here's what I think the problem is. I said, you're trying to be Miguel Cabrera, and you can only be a bad Miguel Cabrera, but you could be a really good Zach Granite if you could just do the things that Zach Granite does well. I said, the problem with your generation is everybody thinks they have to be one guy. Now, that's the way baseball has set it up, that there's only one profile, right? If you can't hit it 435 feet, then you have no value whatsoever, which is baseball's failing. That's baseball's failing. I said, tonight, and here's the other thing, stop thinking forward. Think about tonight. Stranger things have happened than tonight is the last game you ever play. You could walk outside, get hit by a bus. I said, so be where you are, Double-A, Birmingham. Be the best player in that game tonight. And then tomorrow, try to be the best player in that game. And only do the things that you can do well and don't worry about anything else if you could do that. That was 2017. On the way home from winning the Cape Championship, I got a phone call from Zach Granite telling me that he had gotten the call up to the big leagues that year. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. That's the kind of moment that you never forget. To be able to share that moment with somebody who you've had a hand in helping and who means a lot to you, it was just fantastic. So, and Zach and I are great friends to this day. So that's kind of how I handle it. You take it as it comes. But most times it's about recentering a guy. Because most times your failures are more perception than they are reality. You're projecting. I'm 0 for 6. Am I going to go 0 for 36? You got to catch people before they jump off that ledge.
Also, I mean, when coaching in like those like collegiate leagues, how jump off the page is a player that you like? Is it that obvious that someone's going to make the big leagues at that point? Like,
yeah.
Like they jump.
Yeah, there's a pecking order even at that level. Yeah, I mean, I remember one year we had who did we face? We faced who's the kid with the Tigers, the righty pitcher. It's like they're a singer. Is that his name?
Scooble?
No, it was the other kid. Anyway, but yeah, like this guy's going to the big leagues. This guy's going to be a really good player. I'll tell you who jumped off the page to me was Stephen Kwan.
Mm.
That kid was just ridiculous. My eye went right to him. He just did everything right. Everything. I said, this kid's going to be a really good big league player. I'm sorry, I don't care if he's 3'6". He is terrific. He does everything well. Runs the bases beautifully, makes contact, takes good tough pitches, is a tough out. Like that's the kid that could really survive, get through the minor leagues, and be a really good major league player. So yeah, mostly the pitchers. We went up to Falmouth one year. Neil and I talk about this all the time. We went up to Falmouth one year, and they had who'd they have? They had the kid with the Philly, Alec Boehm. They had like 3, 2 years from now, major league player. I said, who are we playing tonight? Like Alec Boehm looked like he was 10 feet tall. They had a couple of other guys. I'm like, who are these guys? And we actually beat them that night. But those kinds of guys do stand out. Yes, no doubt. Where you say this kid is, Bryson Stott. You watch a guy like that, you just know. Jeremy Pena. Jeremy Pena comes to our we do our early work first. I get off the field with our infielders, and this kid, skinny kid, comes to the tall, and I always watch, and I look, and I one of our coaches, I said, let me tell you something. You see that kid? That's a major league shortstop. He took like 3 ground balls, and you could just tell that's a major league shortstop.
What's kind of like that player development model in like the Cape Cod League, where like is there a clear distinction between like those top guys and that floor, and how do you ensure that those guys that are not on the floor obviously but like kind of in that lower tier kind of ensure that they're able to make it to the major leagues?
Well, you can't ensure that anybody's able to make it to the major leagues. That you can't do. All you could really do is create an environment where they get lots of reps and you have a lot of dialogue. I don't think there's any growth without dialogue. I'm a big one for talking. I like to call it a jam session mentality, where you get guys together and they feed off one another. I think the players learn more from each other than they do from us. I really believe that. I really do. I think that we could be a guide and give some wisdom and some philosophy, but in the end, when you see these guys working together, and you just kind of take a step back, you see a lot of growth. And that's where maybe an upper echelon player, as you talk about, starts to impact the lower echelon player, even though a lower echelon player is an excellent player. There's no bad players. But, yeah, the first-round pick now is having a dialogue with some kid from Western Michigan, and the first-round pick's an Arizona State kid or another name-brand school kid, and all of a sudden they're exchanging ideas, and you could see the growth in both of them. So there's really no way to guarantee anybody's going to make the big league because it is a crapshoot no matter how good you are. But the way to ensure that a player is going to be as good as they could possibly be is to allow them to do that. There's a lot of allowing in my opinion, in player development. You have to understand how to allow, because the natural tendency is to like hover and move and manipulate, and you gotta like let things play out a lot, and that's what the whole jam session vibe, I think, engenders.
And also going back to that, I mean, just going back to what I was talking about earlier with ego and stuff like that. Like, I find baseball very interesting because I think baseball is one of the very few sports where like, even if you are like someone who's going to make the major leagues, it's one of the sports I feel like where it humbles you earlier than a lot of like football. The number one draft pick has been the best player on his team his entire. Baseball, once you get to the minor leagues, you're playing against guys who may have bounced back and forth, but when you're managing in those collegiate leagues and you get that player fresh out of high school, like let's say a Stephen Kwan or someone like that who's been this highly sought-after high school player, how do you manage that ego as well, like being like...
Well, it's going to get managed for him because he's going to get humbled in a place like the Cape. Because he's going to be facing some really top-notch pitching. The pitching is ridiculous in the Cape. Every night, one after another. 95, 96, 97, 92 with movement. Lefty from the side, upside down, inside out. Very, guys like Mark Teixeira hit like 130 in the Cape. The Cape is really hard, really hard. So you just sit back and you watch, and you'll see a lot of bat throwing early and a lot of frustration, and like, wow, I'm not in Kansas anymore. No, you're not. You're in, you're in. This is really it. This is the high watermark for your competition. This is not college. This is like a real sample of what it's going to be like when you play professional baseball. This is no joke.
Yeah.
So like when you get that player that is highly sought after and like they're struggling, how do you what like confidence do you give them to make sure that they're like in the right headspace and they understand that, hey, you deserve to be here, you're really good, just keep, like, the process will come?
I think what you have to do, it's a combination of things. I think you gotta work it out of them, like a horse. You run the stress out of a horse. I don't think players do enough. I don't think players rep it out enough. I think there's too much emphasis on rest and load management and all that other stuff. I think there's a real virtue to working yourself to the point where you just collapse. I do. I really believe that. And I don't think there's enough of that, especially in the American player. The Latin player plays all day long until he collapses, eats, goes to bed, and wakes up the next day and plays all day long. Great musicians, what do? They play all day and night, all day and night, all day and night. The Beatles in Hamburg, that's how they became the Beatles, playing all day and night for years. And players don't do that enough. And I think what happens is then that what you're talking about, that unsure kind of feeling starts to creep into your head and it occupies that space and it gets fertilized because you have a lot of energy. But when you have less energy and all you're focused on is the work, you're less focused on the fact that you're not performing as well, and it's going to eat you up less. It's almost a virtue to being tired. You're so tired you can't worry about that other stuff. You got to get back up in the morning, eat breakfast, and get out for early work at 11 o'clock. That's what I think. There's no speech, there's no book, there are no buzzwords that are going to make you feel better about your self-perceived subpar performance. But if you're doing the work and you're sweating and toiling, I think that is a compensation. I really do believe that. I think that innately, that's you being good to yourself. That's being your own best friend, I think.
When you get those players too that when they first come in out of high school and stuff, how do you kind of you say that all the time, you're the best practicer of all time. How do you? I
am the best practicer.
How do you?
No doubt about it. I should actually copyright, but I am.
How do you translate that to your players? Where you might get this player who comes out of high school and because he's been the best doesn't have as much as that work ethic yet. How do you kind of?
Instill that?
I guess instill it, or
get them to buy in.
Yeah, get them to buy in.
It's a little bit of peer pressure. You work them a little bit. If they see other guys doing it, if I see Steve from wherever doing it, and he's taking 200 ground balls from Tommy, all of a sudden, now other guys want it. It's amazing how that works. I very rarely have to ask guys if they want more work. Eventually, they all do, because they see other guys doing it. And it's like, well, if they're doing it, then I should be doing it.
The attitude's contagious.
Right, and then we have a conversation and we talk about our own lives, right? And we talk about our own history in sports and our history in baseball. What did you do? What did you do? Well, I took 8,000 million ground balls, and this is what I did. Yeah, and I don't say it for any other reason than it's true. Or what do you do? I play golf. Really, I hit golf balls every day. Yeah. Well, you play the piano. Yeah, I play every single day. Really? Yeah. Well, if you're going to get better, how the hell is it going to get better? I don't care if you're 60 or if you're 20. The formula is the same. You got to put the time in. So. I think there's a little, it's a little con job that you have to do. There's a little act that you have to put on so that players sort of buy in, because they're buying into something that can only help them. And any time in life you get something that has no downside, and it does. The work has no downside. You should always choose the work.
You also just brought up how you've been studying music recently. You just started playing piano, or not just started, but you've been studying piano.
At the Berklee College of Music.
Yes. At the
Quincy Jones, God rest his soul, is a
yes, rest in peace, Quincy
genius.
Jones. How has music influenced your coaching philosophy?
Immensely.
In what ways?
Immensely. Studying music is the greatest gift I've ever been given, outside, obviously, of people in my life. I didn't touch a musical instrument until I was in my 30s. And then I found a couple of great teachers that helped me. And I probably, what music taught me, when you're in your 30s and you're trying to do something that's impossible, which music feels like it's impossible, anything new feels impossible, and there's like an 8-year-old girl next to you who's better than you are, and you want to punch her in the face because she's better than you.
Specifically an 8-year-old girl.
Little Michelle Taglianetti, I'll never forget her name. Right in the face. I'm not too competitive, am I? No. You really are humbled, and you gain empathy for something that's difficult. And that empathy really I took with me to my players, because I know what it's like to feel so humbled. Like you're at rock bottom as an adult trying to do something. Man, this is hard. Mm-hmm. But what did I do? I drew from my sports background, especially my baseball stuff, and I said, well, if I can get 2 measures perfectly, maybe I can get 4 measures perfect. Then if I can put those 4 measures together, I could play 12 bars. Wow, how gratifying. So then what I was able to do is really re-identify with how great it feels when you accomplish something. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of covering both sides of the equation, the low and the high. And I probably use more music analogies when I'm working with players than I do sports analogies. Rhythm, tempo, timing, feel, in the groove, all that stuff. That's all rooted in music. And music is an organic thing. The other thing about music is you can't fool yourself. It never lies. You know if you're terrible.
Yeah.
All right? You know, and the people around you.
Yeah.
Obviously, they won't say it, but they know you're terrible. So it's not like in sports you can kind of, every kid can convince himself he's really good when he's really not.
Right.
Music, you can't. So music has been just a continuous gift and has informed my coaching more than anything else that I've ever done in my life.
Is there a specific piece of music that you
I
back to?
Well, I studied jazz piano, and obviously I had to take the most difficult part of music and go backwards. I should just try to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. But I love music. Obviously I love the Beatles. I love great music, classical music, and I could, if you asked me to do one thing in my life forever, but I had to give away everything else that I do, the choice would be really easy. It would be music. There's nothing more gratifying than music. Nothing.
All right. We are sadly running out of time here, so I do want to ask one final question before we end up here.
Hold on, let me sit up while I get this one.
We talked about, obviously, where baseball has come.
I haven't made one enemy yet, which is rare.
Yeah?
Not one enemy. So you guys are doing a really good job keeping me in check.
Nice.
We've talked about where baseball has come, obviously, all those changes in the past few years. Where do you see the future of the game going?
Oh, boy. I would have to reverse that question and first say that I could make an argument, and this in no way brings me any joy to say that I could make a very strong, cogent argument for reversing almost every change that baseball has inflicted upon itself, and I use that word inflicted purposely, over the last 7 or 8 years. I think for some reason baseball, the powers that be are trying to fix something that was never broken, and there are times when something in its purest state is in its best state, like great art. We don't need anybody to go in and change the color pattern in the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo's David is perfect, and Abbey Road is perfect, and we don't need anyone to change it because they can. So I would like to think, the hopeful person in me would like to think that this idea that because we can change things, we're going to change things, won't motivate people to change more about something that is a masterpiece in its purest, untouched state. Now, some of the changes I'm okay with. I wouldn't have done them, but I'm okay with them. But others are more egregious to me. My point is that regardless of how many changes you want to make, I think the original work, if you will, the studio version of this album called Baseball, is a masterpiece and doesn't need to be changed.
Well, I think that's a great note to leave it off at. Thank you so much, Mr. Weber, for coming in for this interview.
Dr. Weber.
Dr. Weber.
I like it. Keep pounding him.
Oh, God. For everyone else, obviously, no football today. We did miss out. There's Thursday Night Football tonight for all you guys tuning in. It is... Who's playing tonight?
I actually have no clue. I can't lie. I have no idea.
It's a divisional game. I know that. I want to say...
Thoughts on the Amazon Prime broadcast of NFL football?
I'm sorry. There's just, look, football's in another stratosphere.
There's a lot of analytics on that Thursday night broadcast.
Yeah, I could do
a lot of analytics on that Thursday night
and these
broadcast.
coaches all need to get a little tutorial on when to go for it, and when to not go for it, and when to go for two. Dude, really.
But we got Bengals Ravens tonight, so that one will be it'll be a game. It will be played. I'll say that.
That's gonna be a football game that's played tonight.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think probably they usually do play the games as scheduled.
Yeah,
in the NFL.
Someone will win.
Yes.
All right.
Actually,
it could be a tie.
Could be a tie.
Could be. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you again.
Thank you. I
Weber.
can't tell you. It's. I tell you guys are great. Seriously. So I want to do this again. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your energy and the way you do this with limited budget. You guys are fantastic. Thanks so much.
I really appreciate it. But that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys, everybody on the YouTube who tuned in. Thank you so much. Everybody on WSJU, thank you for tuning in. That is all I got for you guys today. I will see everybody on Tuesday. Peace out.
Are they getting extra credit for watching this?
Yes, absolutely.